The sound of music still resonates throughout the arena, the spotlights shine onto the stage filled with energy, and in the midst of the shaking vocal strains, suddenly the moment just happened without a signal. Taehyung walked slowly approached Jungkook with a thin smile that could not be guessed. Thousands of ARMY immediately shouted as if they knew something would be different. Jungkook had, and within seconds, he pulled Jungkook into such a tight embrace that the audience in the front row immediately put their hands to their mouths in disbelief. The roar of screams mixed with tears. The fans' camera phones shook as they all wanted to record. Some voices were clearly heard in the crowd. "Oh my god, we hug Jungkook." Then another chimed in with an almost tearful tone. "I can't believe look at this directly," while on the side of the stage some of HYBE's staff were seen frantically giving the code by hand, some waving to the camera. Someone looked down while talking quickly through the headset, as if this spontaneous moment had never existed in the scenario, and what made the situation even more intense was Jungkook's gaze after the hug. He turned to the audience with an expression that was difficult to translate between shocked, touched, and confused about what to do, while Taehyung kept smiling casually as if nothing was wrong. The concert MC's voice was swallowed by the boisterous ARMY who shouted their names, Taehyung, 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 echoing from the front row to the upper stands. The atmosphere changed completely. The atmosphere that had been focused on music was now a sea of emotions full of speculation. And behind the stage, the official camera swayed quickly and stopped at another angle, a clear sign that the production team tried to divert the spotlight. But it was too late because the moment had been recorded on thousands of mobile phones, spread in seconds to all social media platforms, and even whispered from some fans who were live streaming live. HYBE must be freaking out right now. Their tone was full of confidence as it was obvious that the manager was trying to get Taehyung's attention back to the formation, while Jungkook just stood there, one hand still hanging as if confused to reply or hold back. And that's where the real drama began. A simple second on stage that seemed to, while inside the arena the cheers continued to soar uncontrollably until the whole room felt shaken by a moment that had already become history. The cheers didn't stop. Thousands of cell phone cameras remained aloft, everyone racing to make sure they didn't miss a second of what had made the arena feel like the center of the world. And amid the hysterical sounds that almost tore through the stadium's ceiling, Taehyung was still standing with his body against Jungkook's, as if time had stopped between them, while Jungkook seemed to take a deep breath, his eyes momentarily closed as if trying to calm a clearly uncontrollable heartbeat. Then he opened his eyes and looked directly at the audience. The gaze was sharp but full of vulnerability, and the fans who saw him immediately reacted with a louder scream. "She's crying, isn't she?" There was an ARMY voice from the side row, then quickly answered, "Oh my god, look at his eyes, like teary." The atmosphere was getting stiffer when the big camera on the stage tried to shift the focus to the other members, but the audience's eyes couldn't be forced. All of them were only on two figures standing too close in the. Some of the staff seemed to be moving faster than usual, their headsets flashing, hands giving codes to the sound engineer. Some even seemed to be running small to the side of the stage carrying clipboards, a sign that the situation was out of control, and ARMY felt it more. They shouted louder, calling Taehyung and Jungkook's names together, making the atmosphere like a storm that could not be stopped. Taehyung finally released the hug with a slow motion. His hand patted Jungkook's shoulder twice like giving a secret signal. His expression was still relaxed, but his eyes seemed to be holding something, while Jungkook lowered his head again and rubbed his face. That moment the cheers turned more haru. Someone shouted, "They are really real. I saw it myself." There were also those who immediately turned on the live feature on their accounts. The vibrating sound of the streaming notification was clearly heard when thousands of spectators outside the arena watched this moment live, until the names of Taehyung and Jungkook began to rise in global trending. And what made the situation even more difficult to control was the fact that the other members on the stage looked a little confused. Jimin had turned his head with a thin, stiff smile. Namjoon tried to calm down by waving to the audience. as if to signal that everything was fine, but the ARMY's cheers did not stop. The camera continued to highlight Jungkook's face, which was still full of emotion, until a faint murmur was heard from the back row audience. HYBE must be thinking hard how to dampen this. The murmur spread like wildfire. Everyone in the stands felt like they were witnessing a history that could not be repeated, and behind the scenes, reportedly the internal chat of the HYBE staff began to be full of emergency instructions. Several eyes were fixed on monitors that displayed different angles, and everyone realized that there was no way to recall a moment that had already gone viral, because in this arena, in front of everyone's eyes, the hug had become a symbol that would always be remembered. And when the music boomed again, trying to return focus to the concert, ARMY's voice did not shrink, it only grew louder. It was as if the hug opened something bigger, something that could no longer be closed with just a change of song. The heartbeat of the arena grew wilder. ARMY's voice that shook like a wave never really subsided. Every corner of the stadium seemed to be filled with inexplicable energy, and on stage Jungkook finally tried to pull himself back into the rhythm of the show. He grabbed the microphone with his hand that still looked a little shaky. His voice sounded hoarse when he said briefly, "Thank you for coming today," then smiled stiffly, a smile that did not manage to hide the shock that had just happened. The audience immediately responded with a louder shout, "Jungkook! Jungkook!" as if they knew that the short sentence was just a way to cover up the still lingering emotional tremor, while Taehyung stood half a step behind him, lowered his head and glanced at ARMY with an expression no less full of question marks. The cheers of Taehyung echoed again, alternating with a short chant led by the front row. "We love you," the voice echoed, mixed with the background music the production team had prepared, but it was clear that the concert atmosphere had moved to another dimension. Not just an ordinary entertainment stage, but the stage that radiates something deeper. Even the official camera that used to follow the scenario neatly this time looks shaky. The angle changes quickly, as if the operator himself is carried away by emotions, while on the left side of the stage a manager is seen handing a water bottle to Jungkook. He accepts quickly and then takes a sip, but his gaze towards the audience still cannot be hidden. A gaze that seems to speak more than 1,000 words. ARMY immediately reads the gaze with their respective interpretations. Someone screams, "He was so touched." Some are just hysterical. "This is not a plan. This is really original." And all the comments were scattered in a matter of seconds on social media, because almost every spectator is now busy doing two things at once, shouting as loud as possible and typing quickly on their phone screens, making Taehyung and Jungkook's names dominate the global trending at the same time. Behind the scenes, the HYBE team looks increasingly busy, some of the staff. And the rumor was immediately blown from the mouth of the audience, who were observant looking at the staff. "They really panic. Just look at the movements." The comment was heard repeatedly on various sides of the stands, making the atmosphere even more tense. While on stage, Namjoon quickly tried to restore focus. He said in a loud voice, "ARMY, let's sing together." Then he raises his hands high, but the audience remains focused on Taehyung and Jungkook, two figures who stand too close, too emotional, too real to ignore. Even as the music booms again, the cheers of Taehyung continued to cut through the air like a mantra, until several other members could only glance at each other, smile faintly, and try to flow with the situation that could no longer be arranged. And just at that moment, Taehyung stepped forward once again, not saying much, just raising his hand towards the audience and giving a heart sign with his finger, a simple moment that immediately triggered a louder scream, as if the world outside the stadium had stopped, all focused on just one point. And that's where it became clear that the hug was not a small moment that could simply be forgotten, but rather the beginning of something much bigger, something that even the staff behind the stage were not prepared to face. The deafening cheers have not decreased even though the music continues to be forced to flow. The stadium seems to have turned into a sea of sounds that only has one center, Taehyung and Jungkook. And at that moment, it is clear how the control of the concert seems to have passed into the hands of the audience. the stage camera that usually neatly follows, while on stage Jungkook tried to shift focus with a small jump to the rhythm of the next song. But his eyes still occasionally glanced at Taehyung, a glance that could not be separated from the audience's cell phone camera shots. Some videos even went viral because they showed Jungkook, who seemed to want to smile but held it back, making ARMY even more hysterical. "He can't lie. That's a really honest look," shouted a fan from the front row, who immediately recorded the person next to him, spread to social media in just seconds. While Taehyung himself remained relaxed, he danced to the music, occasionally throwing a smile at the fans. But when the spotlight accidentally fell on him and Jungkook, who were on the same side, cheers erupted again, as if the audience was deliberately waiting for the momentum to explode again. And backstage, HYBE staff began to look increasingly overwhelmed. Some were busy taking phone calls, some were writing quickly on the tablet screen, and some were seen discussing with serious expressions, as if they were looking for an emergency strategy to control the narrative. And rumors began to flow among fans who sat closer to the backstage area. "I saw the manager almost enter the stage," whispered an ARMY, who immediately agreed with his friend. "Yes, I think they really freaked out." The whisper did not take long to spread to Twitter through live updates written quickly by ARMY's fingers, making the hashtags #TaehyungHug and #HYBE Panic shot up, occupying the top ranks of the world's trending. Everyone in the arena could feel how big this moment was, as if there was no way to return to normal rhythm. Even when Jin tried to joke with the fans, his voice was lost by the cheers that had not yet subsided. This situation was like a storm that kept turning, getting stronger and stronger, and in the midst of that whirlpool of emotions, the big camera caught Jungkook's expression again. This time he bit his lower lip, looked down, then took a deep breath, a simple movement that again made ARMY scream even more hysterically, as if every little detail of it now had a deeper meaning. And Taehyung, whether consciously or not, chose to come closer, even if it was just a few steps, making their return distance too short to go unnoticed. The crowd exploded once again, while the faces of some of the staff on the side of the stage looked stiff. They knew that all this had already become public consumption. There were no censors that could stop the thousands of mobile phones that had broadcast everything to the whole world. And when the music stopped for a moment to transition to the next song, the atmosphere of the stadium was even more intense. ARMY simultaneously shouted long chants. Taehyung and Jungkook's names echoed together. The sound was so compact that it sounded like a tsunami wave crashing into the heart of the concert, making the atmosphere crazier, wilder, and harder to control. Stay awake. The stadium was now roofless. ARMY's voice echoed to the chest of everyone inside, and although the music tried to lead the concert again, it was clear that full control was in the hands of the audience, who only wanted to react to two names, Taehyung and Jungkook. The large screen on the stage that usually shows the visuals of all the members is now occasionally deliberately changed to full-color graphic animation, a clear sign that the production team is trying to avoid the official camera spotlight towards both of them. But ARMY could not be fooled, because thousands of mobile phone cameras kept recording non-stop, generating a sea of real-time content that had spread globally. And at that moment Jungkook had time to open his voice again. "ARMY, you guys are happy, right?" he shouted with bated breath. But instead of answering with the usual chant, the entire stadium responded with a compact shout, "Taehyung! Taehyung!" making Jungkook's expression change in an instant. He closed his eyes, then looked down, his face flushed, one hand squeezing the microphone as if holding something, while Taehyung, who was standing on his right side, could only smile broadly. A relaxed smile, but clearly lit a bigger fire in the hearts of the audience. Some fans cried hysterically, some shouted, "I will never forget this second." Then another cry was heard, "This is real. This is not a scenario." And all of that is clearly recorded in thousands of live streams that instantly spread around the world. Global trending continues to explode with new hashtag variations. Even international media accounts are starting to highlight this phenomenon. The ARMY in the stadium read the update directly on their mobile screens, making the cheers even crazier because they realize this moment is being highlighted by the world. Behind the stage, the faces of the HYBE staff look increasingly tense. Their headsets are full of overlapping instructions. Some raise their hands frantically, some look angry while pointing towards the stage, a sign that they are not ready for a wave of reactions of this size, and the observant army could see all that. The whisper in the stands immediately echoed, "They really can't control now." The comment sparked more shouting, while on the stage Namjoon tried to mediate again. He approached the middle and said in a loud voice, "Army, let's enjoy this moment together." But before he finished, Taehyung suddenly raised his hand high, then gave a small sign towards Jungkook, as if asking him to join in greeting the audience together. Jungkook turned quickly, his expression like hesitant, but finally he stepped forward. And when the two stood side by side facing the army, the stadium literally exploded. The cheers were no longer an ordinary scream, but a kind of emotional scream full of energy. Some fell down crying, some hugged a friend next to them, while the cell phone camera continued to flash like a sea of stars. And just then, the music stopped for a moment for the change of sets. But it was precisely in that silence that the cheers reached the highest peak, creating an atmosphere that gave goosebumps. And, from the point of view of anyone who watched live, it is clear that this is not just an ordinary concert. This is a turning point that will continue to be remembered. Even as HYB's staff looks increasingly frantic, the audience in the stadium knows very well that this moment is already theirs. There is nothing left to stop the wave that has already grown. The beat of the bass shook the stadium again. The spotlights swept across the stage with a quick flash, but the focus of the audience still did not turn away from Taehyung and Jungkook, two figures who now stood just a few steps from each other, both trying to follow the rhythm of the next song with choreographic movements that have been rehearsed thousands of times. But all those watching could feel something different. Jungkook's movements seemed a little more careful. Occasionally he rubbed his face quickly as if to hide an expression that was difficult to control, while Taehyung still looked calm. His little smile never really disappeared, a smile that actually made ARMY even more hysterical. The screams never stopped. Their names kept being called together until creating a chant that echoed stronger than the music. Taehyung. Taehyung, repeated by tens of thousands of people nonstop. The atmosphere made the concert look like it turned into an emotional celebration that was unmatched. Even the other members seemed difficult to hide the confusion. Jimin glanced at Taehyung, then patted him on the shoulder with a thin smile. Namjoon repeatedly raised his hand, trying to get the audience to focus on the song. But obviously the spotlight could not be diverted anymore. Behind the stage, a monitor screen full of camera feeds that now endlessly highlight the faces of the two idols, while HYB's staff stood tense with a mixture of panic and despair, some of them talking fast through headsets, others looked down with their hands covering their faces. A sign that the situation was far beyond the scenario they had designed, and the army who were close to the area could see clearly. They immediately spread updates through live tweets, comments such as "The staff can't control it anymore," or "This is bigger than anything." Immediately triggered thousands of retweets, global trending increasingly dense with new hashtags appearing every minute. Inside the stadium, the atmosphere was even more emotional when the big screen finally highlighted Jungkook, who sang his solo verse. His voice sounded hoarse, full of emotion, as if every word came straight from the heart. The audience was silent for a moment, then shouted even louder when the camera shifted slightly and caught Taehyung standing behind him with sharp but shady eyes. ARMY immediately read and in that second it was also clear how thousands of people realized that they were witnesses of something that could not be repeated, something that they would continue to tell. While the concert production team still tried hard to save the plot by adding visual effects and lighting, but nothing could match the strength of the real moment that was happening. Even the local media present in the VIP, it was as if they had just gotten a big headline, and in that whirlpool of emotion Jungkook closed the verse with a high note that broke. His voice trembled, then he lowered his head deeply. Taehyung patted his hand once gently. ARMY screamed like a storm again. And at that point it was clear that this concert was no longer just a show, but a momentum that shook the entertainment industry as a whole. The changing lights could no longer mask the fact that all the energy of the stadium was concentrated on the two figures in the middle of the stage. Jungkook was still trying to hide his emotions by moving more aggressively along the choreography. Sweat was dripping from his temples, while his breathing was heavy on the microphone, but all eyes were reading every little. And in between the screams there were clearly some broken voices. He's almost crying again, while Taehyung, in a more subdued style, adds to the intensity of the atmosphere, singing his part in a steady low voice, then glancing briefly at Jungkook, a brief look that immediately triggered a loud scream from the entire stands. Taehyung's facial expression was unaffected by anything, but it was precisely that calmness that made the army even more convinced that something bigger was. Some fans who were live on social media shouted in tears, "You all see for yourself, this is not an edit, this is real." Thousands of incoming comments flooded the live broadcast, making the moment even more impossible to stop. While backstage, the atmosphere was completely chaotic. One staff member was seen walking quickly while pressing his cell phone. Another manager was busy picking up the call. Their faces were pale to withstand the stress. The monitor screen displayed streaming statistics that jumped dramatically, meaning millions of people outside. HYBE was clearly unprepared for an explosion of this magnitude, and ARMY could feel the panic because every time the camera's spotlight shifted away from Taehyung and Jungkook, the audience screamed even louder, forcing the focus back to them, until finally the big screen again captured the moment Jungkook accidentally approached too close to Taehyung during the change of formation, their bodies almost touching, ARMY simultaneously screaming hysterically. The stadium seemed to collapse. Some people sat holding their heads, some hugged their friends tightly, while in the stands above a fan shouted as loudly as possible, "I will never forget this moment in my life." The words echoed and were recorded by someone else's camera phone, spreading quickly to the internet, and on the other side of the stage, the expressions of the other members more clearly showed a mixture of confusion and resignation. Youngie only smiled slightly while looking down. Hoseok clapped his hands to the music with forced energy, while Namjoon tried hard to save the atmosphere. "We all love you guys," but again, the cheers of Taehyung cut off his voice easily, showing how powerful the magnet of this moment is. And when the song reached the climax, Jungkook raised his hands high. His voice broke again. This time he immediately covered his face with his palms. ARMY exploded in a long scream. Taehyung just patted his shoulder once again, then walked to the other side of the stage. His relaxed expression remained the same, but the cheers that followed his steps further confirmed that nothing could stop this storm. And every second that passes only makes everything more and more difficult to control. The thrill of the stadium seemed to be getting crazier. The sound of thousands of soldiers simultaneously shouting Taehyung now sounded like a bang that overtook the music. And even when the spotlights were directed at the other members who were performing on the side of the stage, still the crowd's cheers only exploded when the cell phone camera highlighted Taehyung and Jungkook, two focal points that could not be separated from the concert. Jungkook, who had just finished his choreography, seemed to catch his breath quickly, his face still reddened. Occasionally he looked down and smiled a little, an awkward smile that actually made the ARMY scream even more. "Look at him. He can't hide that feeling," a fan shouted from the middle stand, which was immediately recorded by the person next to him and went viral in a matter of minutes, while Taehyung looked a little bolder. He stepped towards the front of the stage, then raised his hand to greet the ARMY, and like lightning struck, mobile phone cameras from thousands of directions highlighted the movement until the entire stadium was filled with flickering light. Like a sea of stars moving after one person, the moment was even more dramatic when Jungkook finally stepped towards Taehyung, not in choreography, but spontaneous movement. He approached and then stood in line, and the audience immediately exploded in screams that made the air tremble. Some fans could be heard crying, "I can't take it anymore. This is too real," while others screamed, "This is history." And the cheers are clearly recorded in thousands of live broadcasts that are now watched by millions of people around the world. Backstage, the atmosphere is getting crazy. The monitor screen is filled with global trending charts that are surging fast. HYBE's manager is seen holding his head in frustration. Some of the staff continued to report the situation through headsets. Their faces pale because they realized all this could not be undone, and the army sitting near the technical area could clearly see the panic movements. They immediately spread updates on social media with the scathing comment, HYBE total panic, but we are in control tonight. The sentence was greeted by thousands of retweets until it became a separate trend. On stage, the situation got hotter when the music stopped for a moment. The army automatically took over with loud chants. Taehyung and Jungkook's names echoed in a harmony that broke the silence. The voice echoed so strongly that it made the camera shake. And just at that moment, Taehyung turned to Jungkook with a small smile. Jungkook just lowered his head and wiped his face again. Army burst into hysterics. Cheers mixed with happy tears. Some people fell to their knees because they could not hold back emotions. And the entire atmosphere of the stadium seemed to turn into a space filled with energy mixed between love, surprise, and pride. Everyone is aware that what they are witnessing is not just an ordinary show, but a moment that will continue to be talked about for years to come, a moment that even management cannot control, because the real power is in the hands of the army who witnessed it with their own eyes and spread it throughout the world. The atmosphere in the stadium reached a point that was hard to believe. Army's cheers no longer sounded like mere concert-goers shouting, but rather like one giant sound wave engulfing the entire room. Everyone's bodies were shaking with pressing energy from all directions and on stage. Jungkook looked increasingly overwhelmed holding his emotions. He wiped his face many times while looking down, his eyes glazed over, while Taehyung stood not far away next to him with an expression that remained calm, his gaze focused towards the audience. As if giving a signal that he was not shaken, he deliberately let the moment live as it is. The army grew wilder. The chant Taehyung never stopped, even beyond the music that was again played louder, as if the concert sound system was defeated by the compactness of thousands of sounds. Some fans were seen holding hands while crying. Some shouted until their voices broke, "This is real. I don't care what people say. I am here and I see it live." The recording of the sentence spread quickly on social media, watched by millions of people in just a few minutes, and global trending is now full of pieces of video, photos, and comments that flooded all platforms. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere is no less dramatic. Some staff can be seen sitting with pale faces while staring at the screen. Some press their foreheads with their hands as if they are heavily dizzy, while the main manager stands back and forth with a cell phone attached to his ear. His face is full of pressure, a clear sign that they are receiving direction from the center. HYBE seems to be in a fog because the public narrative has gotten out of control. Even the international media began airing a short breaking news about this concert. The army in the stadium, reading the update from their phones, screamed hysterically, "This is world news." The cheers immediately triggered a new roar, making the concert feel like an endless sea of energy. On stage, Jungkook finally ventured to open his voice again. With a heavy breath, he said, "Army, thank you for being with us." I don't know what to say. That simple phrase immediately made the stadium burst into tears again, fans screaming in tears, some even. Army was even more hysterical because the small gesture was considered meaningful, and although the music tried to flow back, nothing could stop the emotional momentum that had dominated. The big camera highlighted Jungkook's face soaked in sweat and almost teary, then shifted to Taehyung, who remained smiling. The moment was captured clearly and immediately spread, making the cheers rise to an even crazier level, and it was at this point that everyone realized that this concert could never be forgotten. Army watched live, the world watched through the screen, while the management could only watch with resignation. And that second, the stadium seemed to be a witness of something bigger than just an entertainment stage. The stadium was still rumbling. Thousands of light sticks were shaking in the air as if they were one giant pulse that moved to the rhythm of emotions, and although the last music of the concert had begun to play, it was clear that the army's cheers had not decreased at all. All eyes remained only on Taehyung and Jungkook, two figures who, since the hug, had changed the course of this performance into something impossible to repeat. Jungkook, whose face still looked tired, trying to control his breath, he looked at the audience with wet eyes and smiled a little. A smile that immediately triggered hysterical screams from the entire stadium, while Taehyung calmly stepped closer, this time no hugs, no exaggerated gestures, just simply standing by Jungkook's side while raising his hands high to greet ARMY, and that simple moment actually felt bigger than anything. Because the cheers that appeared sounded like a storm that hit, ARMY hugged each other. Some sobbed loudly, some could only cover their faces with their hands because they were too emotional, while a large camera highlighted the sea of spectators that turned into an ocean of light. Thousands of mobile phones keep recording nonstop, spreading every second around the world. Behind the stage, the HYBE staff seemed completely resigned. They had stopped trying to code. There was no more effort to switch the camera. Only tired faces staring at the monitor screen with long sighs, knowing full well that this narrative had been completely taken over by the army, and the world was now watching without stopping. The cheers of Taehyung shook again when the music stopped right at the end of the song. Jungkook looked down deeply and said quietly into the microphone, "I love you all." His voice trembled. ARMY replied with a long scream mixed with tears, while Taehyung turned his head briefly, smiled, then patted his shoulder once again, a small gesture that immediately made the stadium completely burst. ARMY's voice peaked like a tsunami that engulfed the entire room, making everyone realize that this moment will be recorded forever, not only in the memories of those present, but throughout the world who watched through the screen. And when the stage fireworks finally lit up to close the concert, the cheers did not stop. It only got louder, a sign that this rare moment has officially become part of history. A history that even HYBE herself cannot control, and ARMY knows full well they have just witnessed something that will continue to be talked about for years to come, something that will continue to live on in millions of videos, photos, and memories. A simple hug that transforms into a great symbol, but it's the beginning of a new chapter in a story that will never leave the hearts of everyone watching tonight.